are back with an information-filled podcast for June 2014. We're producing this one a bit quicker than normal because we have lots of great youth footage to share, both positives and some things to work on. This month's pod is 100% devoted to the youth game. No pro clips, so sit back and learn some lessons about the types of games that you officiate. Our plan for this month is to work through some relatively basic things and then work our way up to a few complicated topics. Even then, these semi-complicated topics are still going to feature events from youth games right here in Minnesota. So just because they seem slightly more complex doesn't mean that they can't happen in your game. Starting with the basics, I distinctly recall placing into the material for this year's curriculum the express statement in both the recert and entry material that the old thin striped jersey is no longer considered an acceptable uniform for U.S. soccer. U.S. Soccer gave everybody a few years after the transition to the new jersey to wear the old one and wear it out. That transition started back in 2009. That's 5 years ago, everybody. And yet here we are in 2014, and I still see people wandering around on fields wearing the old thin striped jersey style. For kicks, I went to Official Sports International's website, address shown on the screen, and looked up the price of a new economy short sleeve yellow jersey. $26.95 for the largest size and $1 or $2 cheaper for smaller sizes. Folks, we are talking about one game fee. You work one game, you'll have enough money to get the right jersey. We are long past the point where wearing the old jersey is even remotely acceptable. Please update your uniform so that players, spectators, and coaches know that your professionalism is important to you. If you don't, they'll assume you're in it just for the money, and you're going to lose some credibility points when that happens. Now let's look at a few basic foul recognition topics. Start by having a look at these two clips.
Everybody!
That's a grip.
Outside! Get that back! Go out! Get that!
One of the great myths of the sport of soccer is that, quote, you can't play the ball while you're on the ground. How many of you are watching this and thinking, yeah, that's right, I've heard that. Okay, now go get your law book and tell me exactly what page it says that. Here, I'll wait. Let me guess, you went to Law 12 and couldn't find anything about playing the ball on the ground, right? That's because it doesn't exist. There is no rule in soccer that says that players cannot play the ball on the ground. There has never been a rule that says as much. This isn't a rule change. That rule never existed. What you are getting confused about is that players cannot play the ball in a dangerous manner, or we'll abbreviate here to PIADM. It is possible for a player to be guilty of PIADM when trying to play the ball on the ground, but simply doing so does not make it dangerous. PIADM should only be called when certain criteria are met. First, the act must be dangerous to somebody, including possibly the player committing the act. Second, the act was committed with an opponent nearby. And third, the dangerous nature of the act caused the opponent to cease or back away from challenging for the ball or be otherwise disadvantaged by the decision to avoid making the situation dangerous. Our referee in the first clip makes the wrong decision and calls an infraction against blue. The blue player kicks the ball while on one knee. However, his action does not place him in any danger, nor does it keep either of the red defenders nearby from challenging for the ball. In fact, in spite of the play of the ball by blue, red is actually going to take possession. This is not a foul and should not be called. In the second clip, the blue player plays the ball while on the ground, but once again the white opponent is never forced to avoid playing the ball for fear of injuring the blue player. There's no infraction here. As opposed to the first clip, our referee makes the correct decision and allows play to continue. Let's get something out of our collective heads right now, first and foremost. Players can play the ball while lying on the ground. If they trap the ball under or between their legs or torso, preventing other players from kicking at it, that is PIADM. But simply lying on the ground and kicking at the ball is not an infraction. Now let's consider the case of impeding, a rarely seen and even more rarely called foul. In both of these clips, a white player deliberately moves in front of a blue player to keep that blue player from challenging one of the white player's teammates for the ball. The white player is not within playing distance of the ball, so this cannot be defined as shielding. The referee does a nice job of recognizing the white player's behavior and calling the foul. The key to recognizing this foul is to be aware of where the players are and to turn your attention away from the ball. At these points, there is no blue player actively challenging for the ball, so the referee can afford to take his attention off the ball for such underhanded behavior. These are both good foul calls. We also want to issue a word of caution about calling this foul too much, especially when a defender is escorting the ball back to his or her own goalkeeper. While the idea of being within playing distance still does apply, we tend to be a bit more forgiving about that distance when the teammate is moving the ball back to a goalkeeper. In the grand scheme of things, a small amount of impeding might be forgiven in exchange for avoiding a situation where an attacker lunges in studs first on a goalkeeper. Our next foul recognition clips will look at charging. It's always a good idea to review this foul and make sure we are calling the charges that need to be called, and not penalizing legal contact. In the first clip, the two players come together in the middle of the field and make shoulder-to-shoulder contact. The arms of both players remain at their sides. The white player is knocked off balance but retains possession. Nonetheless, this is most definitely not a foul. The blue player makes shoulder-to-shoulder contact that is while challenging for the ball and is not careless, reckless, or involves excessive force. Even though the players are young, this is acceptable contact. In the second clip, the initial charge by the white player is perfectly acceptable. Again, shoulder to shoulder, challenging for the ball, not careless, reckless, or involving excessive force. After white 26 wins the ball and attempts to clear it from his own half, however, blue 10 charges 26 in the back, and shortly after that, white loses possession of the ball. This foul should be called, which would give white the opportunity to have an unchallenged clearance via free kick instead of being forced to defend another counterattack from blue. In the last clip, the red player releases the ball, is charged in the back by the blue player, and is knocked to the ground. This charge is not shoulder to shoulder, is not a challenge for the ball, and is careless. While it appears red is going to maintain possession, let's also add in a little common sense here. If you're red, would you prefer to have an unchallenged free kick to clear the ball from your own penalty area, or would you prefer to try to work the ball out of the back under pressure? Free kick is the obvious choice here. We mention this concept because we see a lot of inexperienced referees argue that red has, quote, advantage here. Remember, advantage is when we don't call a foul because the team that committed the foul would benefit from the stoppage in play. That is clearly not the case in this situation. The team that was fouled would clearly benefit from the free kick, so there is no advantage. Speaking of advantage, you don't see advantage carried very often at very young age levels, but this is a brilliant job by the referee to eat the whistle and let blue carry the advantage, which leads to a blue goal. The blue player wins the high bouncing ball and plays it forward, but gets leveled by a white defender. The referee brings the whistle to his mouth. Clearly, he recognizes the foul, but then he recognizes that blue is going to keep possession and get a golden scoring chance. He allows play to continue and blue scores. This is an excellent job by the referee to both recognize the foul and use a slow whistle in the attacking third. The only thing missing here would be a nice loud advantage call so that everybody would know that he saw the foul. Now let's talk about your effort and your signal technique on the field. We're going to watch a series of clips focusing on referees and assistant referees, then we'll go back and review each of these for our impressions.
To
Let's start with the throw-in signal for the assistant referee. This signal is used more often than just about any other signal ARs make. We placed a lot of emphasis in the online training that ARs should make this signal with confidence and do it mechanically correct. This means stop, face the field, and raise the flag at a 45-degree angle in the direction of the throw. This assistant is walking while signaling, holding the flag at 90 degrees. This looks sloppy, somewhat careless or disinterested, and lacks a great deal of confidence that the right call is being made. By the end of the match, and probably thanks to the experience that this assistant had gained through the match, the AR's throw-in signal improved significantly. The flag is still a little bit low, but notice how she's now raising it with more assurance and is stopped and is facing the field. We like the improvement. We still see some room for further improvement, but it's important for all of you to make these signals with confidence. Learn to sell your calls through strong signals and good body language. From the same match, watch as play moves into a non-AR corner. Notice how the referee sprints into the corner to stay close to play. Mind you, this is the second half of this game. This referee is showing fantastic urgency and interest in the match. When he makes calls, and this referee made a lot of really good calls in this game, the players never argued. This was because he looked like he cared and he was putting forth an effort that at least matched what the players were putting into the game. If you want to make a good impression, work hard, look interested, and confident. We need to remind all assistant referees that you must, and that is must in all caps with 18 exclamation points, follow the ball to the goal line. We are seeing way too many lazy assistant referees not go to the goal line with the ball. Your most important job as an assistant referee is to judge offside. You're not being paid to be a spectator and stand rooted to one spot, watching the ball bounce back and forth. In this first clip, we see Red play a ball over the top, and our assistant referee stands and watches the ball rainbow towards the back line. If we had a bugle, we'd sneak up behind the assistant referee and blow it as loud as we could in her ear. Why else is this important? Check out this clip. In slow motion and freeze frame, it is clear this ball has crossed the goal line. This should be a goal. This ball was shot with a high arc from about 30 yards out, so there's plenty of time to realize this ball is headed to the goal and turn on a second gear so that you can be there to decide if it's going to cross the line. Instead, the assistant stands on the 6-yard line and watches the whole thing, just like one of the spectators. The blue team loses a legitimate goal because the assistant referee did not follow the ball to the goal line. If I was a coach in this situation, I would not be angry with the assistant because he could not tell whether it was a goal or not. But I would be livid that the assistant referee stood there and watched when he had plenty of time to get to the goal line and try to judge this. If my players came over and complained that this should be a goal, I would counsel them that they were going to have to score goals a little bit more obviously tonight because it was clear our assistant referee was not going to do his job the way he was supposed to be doing it. The coach and the players of the blue team would lose all respect and confidence in this assistant for no reason other than not doing one of the simplest jobs we ask you to do. Follow the ball to the goal line. Work hard. Save yourself a lot of potential grief. We're going to close the simple stuff with a bit of Law 1. How do you put Law 1 in a video? Well, have a look. Blue has been awarded a penalty kick. Unfortunately, the person who painted the field appears to have forgotten to place penalty marks on the field. The referee has to figure out where the attacker should be allowed to place the ball for the kick, so he marches off the distance and ends up at about 14 yards from the goal line. Do you remember where the penalty mark is supposed to be? You should. It's important for referees to know the distances of the markings on the field. These distances become very helpful in things like setting walls on attacking free kicks. The penalty mark is 12 yards off the goal line. As I just said, the referee marked the kick at 14 yards. Oops. If there is no penalty mark on the field, a common mistake made by field painters for youth games, then what's the easiest way to remember where that mark should go? If you know the distance of the lines, the penalty area line is 18 yards off the goal line, which is why a lot of coaches and players refer to it as the 18. The goal area, the smaller box within the penalty area, is 6 yards off the goal line. So the simplest way to spot the ball for the penalty kick is to simply spot it exactly halfway between the two lines. 6 yards from the goal line, 6 yards from the penalty area line, 12 yards from the goal line. Don't waste time trying to march off 6 yards, which will often be inaccurate and lead inevitably to arguments. Just go halfway between the two lines. Now we're going to start moving into some slightly more advanced topics. First up, persistent infringement. A lot of people forget about persistent infringement as one of the 7 cautionable offenses, especially when working youth soccer, and yet it can and does happen. This is a U11 game. Number 22 for White commits 3 fouls in a 10-minute span. The first foul is missed, and we can give the referee a little benefit of the doubt here. He will be screened from this contact, and it's on the opposite side of the goal from his assistant referee. Granted, he could have gotten wider to see this contact, but sometimes this happens. Remember earlier when we said we can give defenders a slight benefit of the doubt on impeding when the goalkeeper is involved? Well, a little shielding is okay, but a two-handed shove without even looking at the ball while you do it is a bit much. If we see this, it needs to be a direct free kick, which in this case would result in a penalty kick. On the second foul, he clips the same blue player as the blue player is trying to bring the ball out of the back. On the third foul, he fouls a smaller blue player who keeps his feet and maintains advantage. Even though no free kick is given, this last foul is still a foul, and it needs to be considered when we account for persistent infringement. Now we understand that number 22's second and third fouls are probably due to a lack of coordination. Neither are as cynical as that first push in the penalty area. Nonetheless, a lack of coordination is not a legitimate excuse to allow a player to continue to foul the opposing team. We don't think a card is needed here, but the referee needs to recognize the pattern and have a word with the player to encourage him to start playing with more care. If you warn a player to stop fouling, and then he keeps fouling shortly thereafter, then it's time to caution for persistent infringement. The persistent infringement card needs to come out to bring that player back under control and recognize that he cannot continue to play in such a careless manner. Our second slightly advanced topic is wall management. Let's watch this clip and then we'll go into the basics of setting a wall.
Oh, yeah, but just
This wall setup seems to go pretty routinely. The referee's fortunate that this is the case because he makes 3 fairly significant mistakes when he sets this wall. Let's review. First, on a ceremonial restart, once you spot the free kick, it is a mortal sin to turn your back to the ball. Never turn your back to the ball. The coy attacker will immediately move the ball forward a foot or two the second you turn around. Set the free kick, and when you go to set the wall, backpedal with your ball in the primary field of vision. Second, get 10 yards. This is 8 yards, which would be fine if it was a U11 or U12 game, but it's not. It's U17, which means the kicking team is due 10 yards. Take a tape measure out in your yard at home and measure out 30 feet. I guarantee you it's longer than you think it is. Always get 10 yards and be safe and get 11.
Third, when you set the wall, you are the first brick in the wall. Don't try to back the team up from 5 or 6 yards away. Go stand exactly where you want the wall to back up to, and then move them to you. If you stand 5 yards away and point, an obnoxious defender will move an inch at a time and make a mockery of your game control. Go to 10 yards, stand there, and tell the wall to move to you. If they're ignoring you, pick the number of the player closest to you and call it out, thus putting a single player now on the hook for abiding by your request or risk being cautioned for failure to respect the required distance. Typically, once you get one player moving, the rest will follow. Whatever you choose to do, don't point. Make them come to you.
This referee eliminates 2 of the 3 mistakes that the first referee made, still makes one of the other mistakes, and adds a new problem. This is U12, so he gets 8 yards, and this looks like 8 yards. He's also the first brick in the wall. Nice job, referee. However, like the prior referee, he turns his back to the ball after he spots it. And as a new wrinkle, once he positions the wall, he then walks away and turns his back to the wall. Just like the kicker who will move the ball forward when you're not looking, I guarantee that a smart wall will inch forward if you turn your back to them. You're probably saying, "Ha! That's ridiculous. This is U12. These kids don't do that kind of stuff." Oh yeah?
That's the problem. It would have been perfect.
Did you see that? The second the referee turned his back, the first kid on the wall took 2 steps forward. By the time the ball is actually kicked, the wall is now about 6 yards away. It is a cardinal rule of setting a wall. Never turn your back to the ball or the wall. And if you think those innocent, cherub-faced 11-year-olds won't make you look like a fool, well, here's the video proof. We're going to finish this month with one of our old standbys, Technical Area Management. Our monthly newsletter in May talked about what a great job we're seeing from people on managing unruly coaches. We're doing much better this year, but we are still seeing people neglect this duty as well. We don't want you initiating confrontations, but if the coach isn't following the rules of the technical area, you have to remind that coach what those rules are. Let's start by noting that a lot of our fields don't have technical areas marked. That's okay, we realize that, but that means you have to consider this in your field inspection and make sure that the playing field is fair before you start the game. On Memorial Day weekend at the NSC Cup in Blaine, I took this image from the spectator side of the field at one of the venues. Mind you, this was present on every field in Blaine. The white team has set up its bench about 5 yards from the halfway line. The green team is about 15 yards away. What kinds of imbalance does this create? Firstly, with no technical area marked, we're going to let the coaches wander a little bit past the end of their benches. If they move 2 to 4 yards past the end of the bench and they're not causing problems, we're not going to bite their head off. But if the white coach moves 4 yards towards the halfway line, he's going to be on the halfway line. If the green coaches move 4 yards toward the halfway line, they're still 10 yards away. What if this game is heated and the white coach loses his cool with a green sub who's waiting to come in? What if a green sub mouths off to a white player or coach and starts a confrontation? Folks, this setup is not okay. Before the game, if there are no technical areas, then go to the coaches and set some boundaries. Talk to them, ask them to set up a bag or a couple of cones to mark the end of their bench. Move the benches so they're equidistant from the halfway line. Give them some leeway because there's no marking, but you have to have a boundary and it has to be fair. As we're about to see, this is simply asking for trouble. In this U12 game, we see the red coach wandering out of his technical area to shout instructions to his players. He's not interfering with the referee's duties at this time. He's not dissenting. He's just shouting instructions, and that's okay. But he has to do that from within his technical area, and he's a good 8 yards down the touchline. He shouldn't be there. How do we deal with this? At a stoppage, we're going to jog over and we're going to be polite and we're going to ask the coach to set some boundaries. Hey coach, I know there's no markings out here, but you can't wander up and down the touchline. Can you put a bag or a cone 3 or 4 yards off the end of your bench to remind you not to walk so far? I'd appreciate it. Thanks. About 10 minutes later, with the ball on the other end of the field, now the coach has wandered down near the halfway line with blue subs waiting to come on. He's still just giving instructions to his players, but remember what I said earlier about frustration and proximity. If somebody gets angry and says something upsetting, the simple fact is that this coach has been allowed near the halfway line and he's probably going to cause problems. Because we haven't dealt with it, at this point, Red sends substitutes to the halfway line, and now both the head and the assistant coach for Red wander down to the halfway line with them to continue giving instructions. Causing a problem? Not right now. Potential for problems? Absolutely. The fourth clip from this game is our first instance of irresponsible behavior. The ball crosses the touchline, and the coach, standing at the halfway line and on top of the touchline, raises his hand and demands that the ball be called out of play. This isn't his job. His job is to coach his players, not make calls for the referee crew. He's out of his technical area, and he's interfering with the view of the assistant referee. This needs to result in an ask. Coach, I really need you to stay in front of your bench and off the touchline. My assistant will call the ball over the line and I trust her to make the call. Please let us do our jobs. After Blue scores a goal, the coach, again permitted to stand outside of this technical area all game, is at the halfway line and now steps onto the field to shout instructions or encouragement to his players. Remember, coaches are never permitted on the field without the permission of the referee. Nonetheless, he's not causing problems for the crew, so if you've already used ask, use another one, this time maybe being a bit more stern. Coach, I'm asking you to stay in front of your bench, off the touchline, and off the field. You're only permitted to set foot on the field with my permission. I want to make sure we're clear on this, Coach, because I feel like my message isn't getting across. I would really prefer to concentrate on officiating the game and not have to worry about you over here, so please help me out. When there are no technical areas painted, coaches sometimes simply forget where they are. Many are more than happy to accommodate your reminder, and some are even genuinely thankful of your attempt to help. A friendly reminder on little things can also be an extremely beneficial interaction later for more controversial decisions. This sort of congenial approach can make those later potentially more testy interactions far more smooth. Now the ball goes out for a throw-in across the field from the coach. A blue player tried to play it but missed right in front of the assistant referee. The assistant referee correctly awards the throw-in to blue. The coach yells out, "No!" and raises his arms in a visual display of dissent. He is, again, outside of his technical area. He did not leave the technical area for the purpose of dissenting. He was outside of the area already, so this is not grounds for the dismissal of the coach. However, it is grounds for tell. Ideally, by this point, we have given him at least one and possibly two asks. Now he's arguing a decision, one that he's not even remotely close to being in a position on the field where he might have a valid argument, in a publicly visual manner, and he's doing it outside of his technical area. Coach, I've asked you once, twice to respect the technical area requirements. Now you are visually dissenting possession calls, ones that you don't even remotely have an opportunity to say that you're in a better position to see than my assistant referee. I am done being polite, Coach. You will act in a responsible manner from here forth, or I will be forced to use more drastic measures to deal with you. Do not make me come over here again. Of course, this all ends with the coup de grace. The referee properly calls a pushing foul as a red player uses his arm to knock over a blue player in possession of the ball. Good call, excellent hard whistle from the referee, and a quiet word to make sure that he gets his point across. This is a really excellent piece of officiating here by the referee. However, We also hear the red coach in the background yell, "That was a great legal tackle. Do it every time." This is clear public dissent. We're going to pan the camera view to the coach who is at the halfway line, out of the technical area, and then he turns and makes a visual display of disgust with the call. Boom. No more ask, no more tell here. Coach, you are dismissed for irresponsible behavior. You are dissenting the decision in a public manner while outside of your technical area. Please leave the field. We'll restart when I am content that you are departing the field. This is a tournament, so we're going to locate the field marshal and inform him or her that the red coach has been dismissed and must be escorted away from the field. Notice, this was a series of 7 clips. This was an absolutely picture-perfect progression of what happens when we do not enforce the rules of the technical area. The first 2 or 3 clips, I'm sure many of you were watching and thinking to yourself, come on, that's not anything serious. If you go talk to him, it's just going to make something out of nothing. If you thought of that, well, you were wrong. Ignoring the little things allowed this coach's behavior to get progressively worse as the game went on. If the referee had perhaps used an ask early, the dismissed behavior by the coach might never have happened. If the referee waited until the dismissed behavior and then chose to use ask or tell, it would have been too little, too late. The coach had already ramped up his behavior to the point of being disrespectful. At this point, no amount of politeness in an ask would have possibly brought this coach's temperature down. If you try to use ask on a coach that is doing this, he will bite your head off. Folks, you can't wait for this thing to blow up and then try to do something about it. Pay attention to the benches and deal with them. Our final clip looks at more irresponsible behavior. We're going back to the NSC Cup. Remember that picture of the benches not being lined up equidistant from the halfway line? And we're going to catch the tail end of a close no offside call that leads to a goal.
If any of his body part is over the line, he's offside. He's offside. Away.
We don't see the offside decision, but the red team scores on a breakaway, and the black defenders are clearly upset, believing that the goal scorer was offside. The AR has indicated this is not the case by following the play to the goal line, then running up the touchline to confirm the goal. Though, we should briefly mention that you should not raise your arms as an AR when signaling a goal. Just run up the line. At this point, we see the referee gesture to the black bench and say, "Not offside, goal." This approach is fine on the condition that the black coach is moaning about the decision from his technical area. However, as we pan to the benches, we can see that the black coach has walked down the touchline, is out of his technical area, and actually steps onto the field so he can yell at the assistant referee. We hear the whistle to restart the game and then hear and see the black coach continuing to yell at the assistant about how, quote, any body part over the halfway line puts the player in offside position. The black coach remains at the halfway line while making this argument, and he's right up on the touchline. The argument seemingly appears to be over, but then the coach turns to re-engage and once again steps onto the field to make his point, only this time we can actually see the ball is in play behind him. Let's call timeout for a moment before we rewind back to the start. The ball is in play, the coach is on the field, furthermore he's on the field with the purpose of dissenting a call, and is in the process blocking the assistant's view of the touchline. Regardless of anything else that has gotten us to this point, this coach is guilty of irresponsible behavior and must be dismissed from the match. He is making a farce of the laws of the game, is interfering with the crew's ability to officiate the game, is on the field without permission, and has left the technical area deliberately to dissent a call. Any of these 4 things by themselves are enough to warrant dismissal. All 4 of them, it's a slam dunk.
Assistant referee at the next stoppage call the referee over and explain to the referee what the coach has done. Referee, when you hear this explanation, you shouldn't have to ask the assistant for a recommended action. You turn and you dismiss the coach. End of story. Okay, now let's talk about why we got to this point. Remember how we started this topic with that picture of the imbalanced bench placement? The black team's bench is 5 yards from the halfway line. With no technical areas painted, the black coach, being so close to the halfway line, likely feels a sense of entitlement to be able to wander a few yards from his bench, which will put him right on the halfway line. This proximity will give him the opportunity to engage the assistant in a dispute, and that's exactly what he does. We're not saying that moving the bench down the line would have prevented the coach from doing it anyway, but if the bench had been moved down the line, his departure from the technical area would have been far more blatant and irresponsible looking, making the decision to deal with him far simpler and straightforward. We go back to the very basics of technical area management. Deal with the little things. When you deal with the little things early, it prevents them from spiraling into bigger things later, and it reminds the coaches that they do not have a license to do whatever they want in their technical areas or to leave them. It reminds the coaches that you are paying attention to them and that you have expectations for them. If you politely ask them to help you out early, it can prevent more hostile interactions later. Don't neglect management of the technical areas because you think it's a hassle, because you're going to find out it's going to be a much bigger hassle later. Whew, that was a big podcast. We'll be taking July off to recover from this effort and spend a little time watching some obscure tournament in Brazil on TV that you may or may not have heard about. We'll see you later this summer.